Yo, hey folks, it's Kevin, Big K Horror here. It's been quite a while since I've done a horror movie review, and now it's the month of October of 2014. I figure I might as well come back, do something, show off something that's kind of obscure, something different. Now, the movie I'm about to do a review of, there is a following to it, and there are people that know about it, and there's also a lot of people that don't know about it. So I'm going to kind of throw this movie out there because there is a following for this movie, and there is a future fan base in the making for this movie, because to me it's already a movie, a classic movie to watch every Halloween season, especially that night when you're like carving pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns and you want to throw a movie on. This movie is it. Alright, and the movie I'm about to suggest to you was told to me by a friend on Facebook. He threw it out at me and I was like, I never even heard of this movie. So I looked it up, did my research, and then another friend I told about it, he was like, Artie, I own that movie, it's great, you know, I'm going to send you a copy. And I'm like, oh shit, are you serious? So I got a copy sent to me through my friend Tim, thank you. And the movie I am talking about is called WNUF Halloween Special. Let me get that in there. Alright, now, this movie right here I'm holding up, okay? It has a quote from the creator of the Blair Witch Project on here. It says, "The craziest thing I've ever seen on live TV." Now, this movie is a mockumentary from 1987. However, this movie was not made in the 80s. It was actually made in 2012, 2013, and it's just made to look like it was made in the 80s. Now, if you, like me, I'm 33 years old, if you grew up, if you're like my age range, and even if you're not, and then, you know, because there's kids like now, burgeoning kids growing up, they're 19, 20, 21 years old, who adored the 80s, the age of the 80s, the graphic of the 80s, the ads, the commercial of the 80s, all that stuff. If you're into that, you have to see this movie right here, WNUF Halloween Special. And it's put out by Camp Motion Pictures. Can't really see it, but there you go. Alright. Now, this movie is, and it's I don't know how to describe it. Okay. You put it on. It's only available on DVD. You put it on, and it begins like a VHS tape with the blueprint, and it says press play, and it hits play. Fast forward, it begins with a commercial of some STDs don't do it commercial, and it fast forwards, and then it cuts to all these commercials, and it begins the live broadcast of a cable access of a news station. The first 20 minutes is pretty much two newscasters, on Halloween night, the ladies dressed in a witch uniform, and the newscaster dude is dressed as Dracula, on Halloween night, being festive. And they're reporting all the news of the night, the safety of trick-or-treating, the 1-year anniversary of this Vietnamese boy who recently got shot and killed by a guy who fought in Vietnam and suffered shell shock, and he thought the boy that was dressed in Vietnam clothing was, one of the people that were coming to his house to attack him, and then there's politician stuff that they talk about, and all this is cut up by is interrupted by 80s, these faux, fake 80s national and local 80s commercials that, commercials that I grew up with. I remember these commercials, but the thing is, these commercials never existed. They were all made just last year, like in 2013, 2012, but they are dead on, like 1987. I'm talking hairstyles, clothes, I'm talking about Commodore computers, technology, everything about it is right on 1987. They went out of their fucking way to make it the 80s. No joke. I mean, when you're watching this, you're really thinking you're watching a 1987 live broadcast, but you're really not. I mean, they went out of their way. I think the whole budget was spent on finding every single duplication of every 80s thing and 80s hairstyle and everything to make it look 1980s. Now, the first 20-30 minutes is the live news, cable access broadcasts of the news. Like I said, interrupted and interspersed with all these television commercials. And part of the novelty of this is this movie is not really scary. Sure, it does have blood and gore in it, and it has things that go bump in the night, you know, and whatnot. And I'm going to get to that. But this is a novelty. It's for the fans of people who grew up in the 80s, waiting up late at night, watching that horror movie that you're not supposed to be watching late at night on cable access television, and seeing all these television commercials. You know, the television commercials for suicide prevention, and the television commercials for STDs, and then the 1-900 numbers for dial a monster, talk to the zombie killers, blah blah blah, talk to the scariest monsters alive, you know, things like that. And I mean, it has it all on here. And then, you know, it cuts to commercials for, like, buy the, you know, there's this awesome commercial for, like, a cassette tape for the best heavy metal hits of the 80s by bands called Crocken, you know, which is a takeoff of Dokken, you know, Dream Warriors of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, you know, Dream Warriors, you know, just all this stuff. And it's, I mean, it's dead on, and everything is faux 80s, you know, fake 80s shit. And after the news special from the two reporters, it cuts into a live broadcast, and I'm going to read the synopsis on the back here. Okay, and local television personality Frank Stewart leads a group of paranormal investigators, including Catholic exorcist Father Joseph Matheson and the prolific husband and wife team Louis and Claire Berger. Now, this prolific team of paranormal investigators, this is a kind of mock take of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, I'm a big fan of Ed and Lorraine Warren because I grew up in the 80s watching Sightings and Unsolved Mysteries and, of course, the Amityville Horror and reading their books. And anybody who's seen The Conjuring recently, the James Wan film, knows who Ed and Lorraine Warren are. Well, this old husband and wife team are kind of mocking them, but in a funny wink tongue-in-cheek way. It's not making fun of them really, it's just kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's supposed to be them. Anyway, I digress. Okay, the prolific husband and wife team Louis and Claire Berger. Together, the experts explore the darkest corners of the supposedly haunted Weber house, trying to prove the existence of the demonic entities within. Did they find the horrific truth or simply put superstitious rumors to rest? Now, the whole thing is, after the news broadcast that you're watching, along with all the 80s commercials and advertisements are local and national, and it's all done as, you know, local cable access. And I mean done with the local prints, like, I can't explain it, but when you grew up in that time, there was a certain print to the television, like you are watching, you know, WNUF channel 28, you know, things like that. It's all done in this. And this is pretty much done like, you know, found footage, but it's not your typical found footage. It's like 80s found footage, but live cable access found footage. Again, the first 20-30 minutes is of news broadcasts with the novelty of all these 80s commercials of, like I said, suicide hotlines, STD commercials, the dentist commercials of turn your trick-or-treat candy in and get it for a pound of candy, you get $1. The safety on the, you know, the safety, the trick-or-treat safety tips by the sheriff of not opening candy and getting AIDS, you know, the AIDS scare of the 80s. It's got so much tongue-in-cheek humor in this, of the 80s, you know, in this. And and then it's got ads in there again for the top heavy metal hits of the 80s on cassette tape, and then it's got ads for the monster makeup kit for the trick-or-treaters, and then of course the 1-900 dial monster ads, and just things that I remember from my youth when I would stay up late watching local access cable television shows, watching late night horror films, when I wasn't supposed to. It's all in this, and they recreated it perfectly, because you really think you're watching 1980s, but you're not. It's 2012, 2013. I don't know how they recreated it, but they did. And then after the live news broadcast of the two newscasters, it cuts to this guy, this other local television personality, Frank Stewart, who's kind of a douchebag, who cuts to this old abandoned house. It's been abandoned for years, because years before, a family moved into this house where the teenage son found a Ouija board, whatever, and he did a seance on the board where and the ghost told him to kill and murder his family, which he did with an axe. And he hacked them up and buried and dragged the dead pieces of the bodies of his family down to the basement. The police found him, locked him up, and then he was executed. Years later, there's reports of ghosts found in the house and a lot of paranormal activity. And on this night on Halloween, being broadcast live, they are going to go into the house with this Anna Lorraine Warren-esque paranormal investigator team plus this priest, and they're going to do a live seance, which is funny because if you grew up with local access, cable access, you could actually call in and prank call and say obscene things, which they do on this, which is funny as hell, and just all these things ensue, and when they actually go in to do the live seance, that's when all hell breaks loose. And that's when the things go bump in the night, and some blood ensues, and other things, and there's a twist to it and stuff like that. And before all this, when they're doing the live broadcast with the newscasters in the beginning, there's also this whole thing about the town. But there's this Baptist cult trying to ban Halloween because they believe Halloween's for Satanists and it's of the devil, blah 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 blah. And there's like someone around town murdering a bunch of animals and stuff like that, and that ties into the movie and whatever, and you don't know quite what's going on. It's a fun movie, but you feel like you're watching a live broadcast of this local access cable television that was recorded on a VHS cassette tape from 1987. That's what you feel like what you're watching, hence why it's called WNUF Halloween Special. And this is the cover of this little boy in his Halloween costume with all the candy around him, looking shocked at the television set. And it's advertised as a real live 1987, broadcast. But when you do your research online, really it's not. The director was just like, hey, I wanted to do a throwback to the 1980s cable access late night movies when you're a kid and you're not supposed to stay up and watch these, but you did. And again, he nailed every single aspect of 1980s with the commercials, with the new cable access news television, news crew stuff, and even when they go into the haunted house, everything, it's all there. And this movie is, I forget the running length, I think it's, it runs about like an hour and 30 minutes, maybe an hour and 20 minutes, I'm not sure. It's not a very long movie, but it's a fun exercise. It's not supposed to be too scary. It does get intense in the last 15-20 minutes, but again, it's more of a novelty than it is a horror film. Okay, again, if you're a fan of 80s nostalgia, this is what this movie is for. It's 80s nostalgia for Halloween nostalgia. Completely. That's what this is. So if you are one night, if you're a fan of the local access, cable access, 80s commercial, fake 80s commercials, but done right, done realistically, all that, and then wanting to watch like this like local access, found footage where these people go into a real life haunted house seance where all hell ensues, check this movie out. It's fun. It's a blast. you'll have a good time. But again, it's for the people who grew up in the 80s and like the 80s. If you hated the 80s and you hated the style, you hated the fonts, you hated all that stuff, you may want to avoid it.